More time. Okay. Might be hard to see. I noticed on my video yesterday I couldn't see the color of these little particles that are floating up into the air. So it was hard to tell that these were little embers or orange embers floating up, which kind of sucks, but hopefully you can see them. I don't want to make the sprite bigger at the moment because that would make everything look strange on my end, but right now I'm just kind of working through different weather types. You see I've got this, I don't know if you can see it, maybe you can, hopefully you can. You can sort of see it. I've made this kind of steam or smoke. There's an falling ash effect. I kind of want to give that a little bit more wiggle. There we go, a little bit more wiggle. Closer it is to the center here, or to the right, it changes whether it behaves like falling rain or snow, and I kind of want these to be like drifty little ashes. And then these little orange dots are rising embers, kind of trying to show that it's really hot here. I might work more into the effects later, but I've got these animated cloud layers in here, and those are pretty simple. I can actually show you how I made those. Most of the animations that I'm using in the game, if I'm importing any animations, I'm using 32 frames, so I don't go too crazy, because these are pretty big. I could actually probably find a way to shrink the size of these, because there's a lot of empty space. So I'll have to find some way to crop these down. But right now, it's just a 32 frame animation. I can kind of explain a little bit about the animation stuff if you've never used it before. Normally I like to give the layer a name. It'll change it right here, but you can type in the name here, so I just call it clouds. And this is what you see when you're using this sequence editor. You'll see the names here, but it'll only show up if you click save first. So by default they usually say animation 1, and so if you change the name here you have to click save before you can see it in the sequence editor. So since I'm working in top down, I switch the camera here to top down. These will let you change to different orientations depending on the type of game that you're doing, and I'm going to set this as an overlay effect since I want to use it as like a cloud or a weather layer. I don't need it to particularly face any of these. I don't even have to use overlay. You could use face X, but any of these other ones will make it disappear. So I'm going to use overlay. Billboard will just make it face the camera, but it doesn't treat it like an interface element, so it can get scaled depending on how the camera is set up. But I don't want to scale it in any way, so I'm just going to use overlay. And you've got these two settings here. Pose rate. This is how many of these frames play per second, and you'll see the pose length also indicates how many of these little keyframes there are, and you can tick through all of them, but you could set a different pose length if you wanted. You don't have to, but you can give it more or less, and it will change the keyframe, the number of keyframes. I'm going to stick with 32 because I have 32 frames in my animation, but this allows you to add keyframes anywhere, so you could actually go right into the center, say 16, and you can change the opacity, and then go to the very last keyframe and bring it back up again, and by doing that it'll actually automatically tween between the opacity settings you have. So it'll fade in and fade out and come back in, and it'll just loop that. You can do all kinds of stuff with these keyframes. I do want to get rid of that transparency in the center, so I go to sometimes it's a pain if you accidentally change the wrong keyframe, but that allows you to do things like move it around, and you can keyframe the movements, so you could change the movement and it'll actually move around smoothly, but I don't want it to move anywhere, so I'm going to get rid of that. that's how you would set up little animations, and it's the same place where you would work with collisions, and you can set up all kinds of different types of collisions. You can import a mesh collision to match 3D objects, or you can just create a simple collision box, and you can draw those in there. But since this is going to be a cloud overlay, it doesn't need one. The pose rate here determines how fast it plays, so if you have particle generation going, like, say, let me see where, I know I have one where I'm using a pose rate difference. I just don't remember which one. Well, normally I tend to match my pose rate to the lifetime of my particles if I'm doing something like that, so it actually plays the animation slower in the game, but you'll notice sometimes things like explosions, I believe I have the animation for breaking rocks. If you use the default, it plays really fast when you're in game. Because the lifetime of these is 0.2, I just set the pose to 1 so it plays the whole. It'll play the entire animation slower, then sort of stretch out the particles lifetime. I don't really know how to explain that, but with a little bit of experimenting, you can actually match and change the length of your animations, especially if you're working with particles, using pose rate to change them. There's also this smaller one here, the frame time. That's how many milliseconds each frame lasts, and that just changes things like if I wanted the animation here to play a little bit slower, the undulating clouds, you can slow down how fast the frames play back. But that looks terrible, so I'm going to leave it at 0.1. And so far, I've made a set of just plain white clouds. It's just a circular shape. I actually need to come in here at some point, probably in this video. I'm going to actually adjust my gradients so that I have more cloud layer and less outer transparent boundary. I've also got a radiated cloud, and that I've just changed the node color here. You can use the same animation and change the colors as long as it's white, black and white, or grayscale. Just changing these colors will apply it really nicely. You can see it on a black background much better, or with different colors. I actually think it's because I have it set to additive that you can't see it at all, because it'll just blend in with white. Turn that off. I've got the sandstorm clouds. Those are kind of more of like an orangish yellow color. And then I did the volcanic smoke using particles. So these just spawn. It's hard to see it because it only spawns a couple at a time. It'll spawn a maximum of 2, so every time you play it, you'll see the clouds appear in a different spot. You'll see it starting over here now, and it's starting up here now. And that's because I've actually set the starting distance to the size of the cloud graphic, so it'll just position these clouds all over the place. But if there's a limit to the amount, it'll only spawn 2 at a time. And since I'm using it as a weather layer on the planet, oh my goodness. Yeah, sometimes it takes a while to save bigger images, but since I'm using it as a particle layer here on the planet, you can see that it's just spawning them randomly around the screen. And since there's a lifetime limit, it only spawns them along the bottom, so it's kind of like a rising smoke effect, because I'm using it as a cloud layer. And the cloud layers, each cloud will only spawn the particle twice, so as they come into the screen or onto the screen, it'll spawn 2 little poofs in a random spot, but it doesn't spawn them all over the place. I don't know if that's intentional or not. I figured when I first started messing with this that I would see more clouds spawning all over the place, but it's actually a good way to just create something that's all along the bottom, I think. Then I've got these denser clouds. those actually indicate more of like a thunderstorm or just a normal terrestrial storm, cloudy day. Pretty much made with the same exact animated clouds, only they're blowing east to west using this wind setting here. We've got the ice map. It's a bit more cloudy. I'm using just one single layer, but with much lower speed. Excuse me. And I've changed the size variation value so that it's actually making smaller versions and larger versions. You can kind of see it if I scoot the map around, but I've coupled that with these really dense snow particles, or snow, I guess it's part of the built-in rain and snow system. It's just a sprite that looks like a little round snowflake, and those are coupled with this dense, hazy cloud layer. And I've got the desert, sandstorm style clouds. Once again, it's the same exact cloud animation, just set to blow to the west. It can blow in any direction, really. You can set it to blow southeast. And I've got these particles that are just kind of blasting sand in every direction. I think it looks pretty nice going slightly southwest, just blasting across the screen here. And lastly, I don't have a tile set for a extremely radiated planet quite yet, so I'm using just a duplicate of my lava map, but a radiated planet is going to have more still clouds. This might be a bit extreme. I'm not sure how it's going to look with a tile set that matches this greenish color, but radiated worlds are probably just going to be a variety of different biomes with this radiation layer. And if you can see them, there's all these little green sparkles that are spawning and shooting off in every direction. And that's basically set up the same way as the others, only I'm using two cloud layers. One is for these little radiation sparkles. It's very similar to the embers from the hot maps. And then I've got the radiation cloud layer, which both of them are set to barely move. The range of the speed range is actually set to 0 to 32. So some of them are moving, some of them are just sitting still right where they spawn. So it just looks like these little patches of radiation everywhere. Hopefully that's coming through nice and clean on this stream. I'm not sure. Kind of disappointed in my video from yesterday. The last section didn't really show the embers and the little sparkles. Everything seemed kind of washed out, but that might be my fault. I'm not really on a great internet connection here. So that's a couple of the weather effects, and as I started to go along, really things start to pile up very quickly when you're working on a game. I used to have piles and piles of notebooks just full of these little sketches and drawings, and basically all of these sections just handwritten. And it's nice and convenient to have the ability to store all these different little text files, and I've actually got tons of them at this point. There's not as many at the moment in this particular folder because some of them are still in the old space game, the old Alpha Delta prototype. I've got just text files full of, all different kinds of things, stuff for the tile sets and like trade goods and weapons and characters, and it's an undertaking. So I'm trying to squeeze in as much as I can, and that's why part of what I've gotten into working with the Screaming Brain Studios project is procedural generated graphics, which really has helped not just as far as my enjoyment of making graphics goes. That's separate. It's a whole adventure on its own, like digging for techniques and learning and teaching yourself software. But then it also helps simplify my game development process. So rather than hand drawing every single texture in every single tile, which I know some people prefer, some people like to do hand-drawn stuff. I have tried to adapt all these procedural generation methods into usable artwork for my games. So all the stuff that you see, there's very minimal editing on my part. Sometimes I do some pixel art and I do some drawings. I've actually drawn the ship, the player ship, was something that I drew manually. It's not very great, but I've had it sitting around for years. At this point, it's just the characteristic ship of this game, and I think that was one of my earliest pixel art attempts. And as you can see, it's not necessarily the most beautiful thing, but it does look kind of like a little rusty hauler, and it's got jets and discernible sections, discernible parts. You can see that it's got the front, cockpit area, or the bridge, and then this whole chunk back here. But everything else that you see in this game, basically, or in any of my projects, is all the result of procedural generation from the bottom all the way up to the top. So it starts with the materials for each of my each of my terrains. I can kind of break that down in a simpler way, where if you look at each of these tiles, I think I showed in one of the previous videos, I do tend to use these textures to make my tile sets. They're existing textures of snow and dirt and grass. Those have all been made using procedural methods, non-destructive authoring methods, that basically turn different nodes, different types of noise and blending modes, until you end up with all kinds of different things. Like the textures that I've been creating for Screaming Brain Studios are almost all using these procedural texture authoring methods. So you can see all these different types of dirts and rocks. None of these are photographs, and they're all made using little nodes and blending layers. So it starts at the very base, where I have to build a material for my, these ones aren't mine, but I'll start with a basic material, make some grass using a substance lab here, or sometimes I do use photographs. There's a node here called synthesis that lets me import images, and I can actually use photographs for my tiles. But I'm just looking for different types of materials: rocks, grass, plants, dirt. And so I make these little textures first. The second method is to combine them using my mask system. These are blending masks that I've created. I've shown these in some of my older videos too, but if you haven't seen any of it, feel free to go check them out. There's some interesting stuff. But these different types of masks allow me to blend these together. These different procedurally generated textures I can blend together into reasonably nice looking tile sets. These are procedurally generated ores. I could actually go back into my ore texture, change exactly, I could change everything. I could change where the stones are, I could change the size of the little rocky chunks, I could change the colors, all of it. And then I can easily just make these tile sets, so I don't have to manually draw hundreds and hundreds of different tiles. It saves so much time. In my opinion, that's one of my favorite things to do, is come up with these new ways to use these procedural methods. So I'll design some textures, combine them into these tile sets, and then from there, once you get into the space areas, everything that you see is procedurally generated too, from the backgrounds to the planets, the suns, the stars, everything that is shown here, these textures. There's a tutorial on my website about making these, using software to make these kinds of textures, or how to turn them into 2D planet sprites for your own games. But the backgrounds have been generated procedurally using different types of noise and blending. The planets have been generated the same way, and the sun is also procedurally generated. It's noise with just some animated noise, all of it. It's something that I like to try and experiment with. The only thing that's not going to be is likely going to be the object, space stations, spaceships, character portraits and such. They won't be procedurally generated because I'd like to have some objects that I know what I want them to look like specifically. But the process of getting them there might use procedurally generated textures and stuff. So that's why I use all these different programs. A lot of it's just to simplify my workflow, so I don't, as a game developer even, I don't have all the time in the world to do everything by myself, let alone hand draw an entire game's worth of art, as much as I'd like to. But so these little particle effects are super easy to make inside 001. The clouds and stuff, it's a simple procedurally generated animated cloud layer. All I'm really doing is taking a basic noise generator, and then you cycle through the frequency levels, and that causes it to do this rippling effect. That allows you to, I guess effectively it makes it look like you're moving through the noise, like a slice as it slides through, and then after a few combinations with some other noise, you get this cool blobby cloud look. And then I've run it through a set of combined nodes to crop it out at the center. And really, this gradient here, I think I want to put it closer to 500, even less, because it's cropped out way too much and it's left so much blank space around the outside. So I'll come back to that later, but that gives me that animated cloud. It's just made out of randomly generated noise, and it's super easy to make. You can do it on your own and import even static noise. It doesn't have to be animated. You can import circular noise and just use the additive blending inside 001 to get this cool effect. So that's kind of me rambling on about these random things that I've been working on, and I want to do more tile sets for the planets, but I'd like to finish up some of my terrain stuff, the hazards. Oh man. I don't think I'll be finishing them all today, but we'll see what I get to. Kind of having an aimless day today, so I'm not really sure what I'm going to work on, but since I'm working on the game, period. Whoops. Right now I've kind of got it set up so I can cycle through these different planet biomes with a single button. So driving around on a stormy planet with rain. It's harmless rain. It's not going to do anything to the rover. You can still go into the water. Doesn't make anything wet. I think doing something like that would be a little bit too complicated. And there's also the heat effect as you're driving around on a hot planet. You can see the little ashes falling down and these little embers rising up. Right now, I think I forgot to set ash to be more passable terrain, so it's slowing down the rover. And there's currently no lava damage yet, so I'll have to add that. So when you go over hot stuff, that it hurts the rover if it doesn't have protection or something. And there's the desert storms. I know I showed them all off earlier, but I haven't shown them in game quite yet. There's a little bit of slip and sliding in sand, but not as much as you get on ice, which you would find in a snowy biome. Right now, snow is still counted as mud, but then you can slip and slide around on the ice. That kind of propels you into the slow ice, or slow snow. But And the clouds do kind of obscure things. There's another layer that I want to add in as well that kind of, I'm hoping to do some kind of overlay that obscures parts of the map so you can only sort of see within this little bubble. And that's only if the storms are high enough. I haven't actually sat down to plot out every single detail quite yet. I'm just brainstorming and designing these different little concepts. But, oh, laser turret. Slap me in the butt. Pew pew to you too. So the climate level here, I still have to include the temperature, actually fix that interface so that it includes temperature, but the climate level, each of these is a different level of danger on the planet. I haven't nailed down if tectonics is going to be one of them, because there's some influence, obvious influence from the Star Control series, which actually had little earthquakes that would spawn on the planet, and that's actually something I'd like to do as a hazard. As you're driving around, there's certain areas little quakes will spawn, and that can damage the rover. That's going to be measured by the tectonics rating. But then there's also the climate rating. That's going to determine the weather that you see. So if it's a terrestrial planet with a climate rating of 1, there's going to be no storms. There's probably going to be no rain, no nothing. Climate rating of 2 is just going to have light rainstorms. Climate rating of 3, I believe, is when it's going to start getting more cloudy. I want to add this overlay that makes just the rover visible, and I've got some ideas how I want to do it. It'll be similar to what I'm doing over here in Genetica. I'd like to use one of my gradients, but I have to reverse everything so that it's just a circle inside. And I want it to be a much smoother interior. So let's put it at 0.9. So at least there's this light center that'll be right around the rover. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking for sort of a nighttime look. I'm not sure how it's going to look inside 001 quite yet. I need it to be a certain size though, because in order for it to work as a frame here, I can't render out rectangles with this program, which is unfortunate, but it's a limitation that I have to work within. So I have to go by the height of this being 320 and the width being 640. So I want it to be 640. So it's going to be huge when I render it. So it'd be a big old square, if it ever shows up. There we go, one big square. That's pretty massive, and the sphere in the center is way too big, but I need it to have this black frame around it. So I want to come back over here, and I actually want to shrink my sphere down just a bit. So this is at 500. Let's put it at 75. And my transparency, that might even be too much. A little bit too small. Let's put it more around 600. I have to hit enter every time. I forgot. That gives me sort of a smaller circle in the center. Still kind of too big for what I want. So I'm actually going to scoot this closer to the end. 95. And I'll scoot this just a bit further, so it's 7. I need to be nice and small in the center, because I'm going to cut out a rectangle. And this is just an experiment. I've never actually tried this, so This is brand new for me, just like it might be brand new for you. Rover visibility. Just going to test this. This is pretty massive. First thing I want to do is come into my world creator. I'm going to pull that in here. Oh yeah, I forgot. I can't because it doesn't work with transparencies. Just kidding. So, I can edit it in 001, thankfully. Also, if you're testing animations and weather stuff, turn them off when you're previewing things if you're just sitting around doing something else, because I've noticed sometimes 001 sort of hangs up here trying to load these gigantic animation pieces, so I'm going to have to shrink those myself. That's going to suck. Cropping 32 frame animations. So right now it's going to freeze up when it's trying to come back into 001 because of these animations. I want to test this little sphere out. Some of you probably already know where I'm going. There we go. 001 is back. Turn off my weather effects so I don't bog myself down, or bog my system down. And then come in here. I kind of want to create a new folder. Overlays. And I'll call it dark. FX overlay dark. We'll go grab that. I'm not going to be able to tell exactly what's going on yet. Not even 100% sure if it's going to work the way I want it to just yet. So I've got transparency. You can see that I can see through it. Now I want to subtract an equal amount from each side here, and me being terrible with math, I want it to be 320, so I need to subtract half of 320 from each side. So I want to subtract 110 from 640. I'm not good at doing math in my head, so I want to resize the canvas to 530. So I take off the bottom half. Now, Control A, I'm going to flip it vertically, do the same thing, minus 110. I actually want it to be 320. Oops. Yeah, that was 160, not 110. See how terrible at math I am? 160, so I want 640 minus 160. Now Control A, flip it vertically, minus 160 to get 320, which I should have known. That gives me this centered piece that I can plop into my interface just to test. It's going to go over everything at the moment. First thing I want to do, create a new field. Turn off all this unnecessary stuff. And then I'm going to change this to a static sprite. Don't need per pixel cursor. Down to my overlays. I've got this. It's not going to display yet because I forgot to set the orientation. I'll turn that off. I'll just call this overlay. And I'll set this to overlay. That'll make it an interface overlay style graphic. You can't see it unless you're looking at it with a grid behind it. Now it'll pop up and show up here on my interface. And I can actually put it right on top of everything. We'll move it to the very back. At the moment, I just want to give it a weird number or a weird set of symbols, just so I can see where it is in my list here. If I move it around, I don't have to go hunting for it. I'll move it forward, move it ahead of these. It should be behind everything else, including the static. So the scan lines shall be in front of it. Won't be able to see it until I'm on the planet, and it should just be there once I land. This is not quite like making a flashlight or like a cave light or something for an RPG, because you'd have to make one the size of the screen. I want it to be centered on the rover, and that's a little bit trickier because the rover can move out of the range of the circle, which means I need the circle, the outside edge has to be even bigger, which is crazy to me. Oh, it's going to be a huge image. So I only have to increase its size on the sides, the width and height, so that it matches as far up as the rover can drive on a map. That's hard to explain without being able to see it, but let's move over to a volcanic map, where this kind of effect might be more effective. It's kind of like you're driving around in caverns or dark areas. Doesn't work as nicely with the desert. Some of these I might widen the sphere somehow and stretch it out, but I'm not really sure just yet what I want to do. That's kind of the effect I want to go for, a visibility sphere. Now, the other thing that I would like to do is have static surrounding this sphere in some cases. That would be a trickier effect. I'll actually have to create a static animation that has a sphere in the center of it and determine all the sizes, and yikes, I don't know if I want to do that. Some of the quirks of 001 are, there's no like built-in masking where you can actually use graphics to create these effects. It can only import sprites and use additive blending, so there's no way to like create like a real light out of a sphere like this. But you can create this effect, but then it has to move around with the rover, so if this sprite moves with the rover, it'll create this big gap here unless there's another 300 pixels or so of black. So it'd have to be a really big square. Oh goodness, that's going to be rough. brainstorm a bit and think about how I want to do some of these effects. Where did I put? Hey, let's see. Oh man. Let me try something. I don't know what I'm doing exactly. I kind of want it to be the opposite, where the static is surrounding the outer edge here. So, come over here and reverse my, ooh, no I'm not. Invert gives me white and transparent, not what I want either. No, yeah. Paste that, copy, paste that. Do a little experimenting. Get this out of my way. Move. Okay. I want the circle to be exactly the same size in the center, but if I reverse it, I get this massive big circle. And I forget what I need to do exactly. I think I just need to switch these two transparency values. Yeah. Now I can switch those. I'm just experimenting with all of this, so I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to get any of it right. Static remover. La 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 la. I always forget to put these in the idle pose. Switch this one over to my other overlay. Nope. I'd have to have some different kind of blending method. So I don't want that. Oh, I really don't want to have to render a huge, oh, it should be 320 by 320 times tiled. No, all of my ideas in my head will not work. Let's go to my presets. Where's my static? Did I save my static somewhere else? Oh, I don't remember where I saved them. I might not have saved my static. Well, I've got a backup of static animation. My technology folder, grab some static here. Actually, I don't want to do that. Oops. Do want to open it here. Grab it. Paste it in here. Oops. Just paste. Stop pasting it there. And the problem is I need it to be huge. I also need that to be over here. Stretch it on the y-axis just a bit. I don't know if I need to do the x-axis. And again, this is another experiment that may or may not work anywhere near what I want it to, or how I want it to. That's a bit crazy. Oops. Oops. Give it a name, static over. Ah, this is going to be tough. Just trying to think of how I want to do this. Just call that visibility for now. And this is going to lock up everything because this is a huge huge sequence of images. So give it a second because it's actually going to freeze up my system here for a second. Now, center that, get rid of that, and as all the other static, make that additive. So now it should have a big hole in the center. It's going to be ugly and dumb. I don't think this is going to work the way I'm expecting. Or I might have to do a lot of tweaking. This is going to resize this static square. It's going to be much bigger. Also have to find my overlay folder, visibility. As always, I'm sure I'm not the only one who does this every single time. I always forget to set the orientation to overlay. And then Who knows? Let's make it easier for me to move around. I'm going to center it. Put it right at the middle. That in front of it. That's going to look crazy right now. It's going to look crazy in the game. I want that centered. I'm going to move this forward. Just a couple. Where'd it go? Now, is that not in front of it? Who knows?
Scanning. Entering planetary orbit.
Now they're supposed to be opposite each other. I don't know why that's not working. What? Oh, that's because I'm being dumb. I had two of the same thing.
Scanning.
Turbo.
Entering planetary orbit.
That's more what I'm looking for. So there's interference. That is hard to see. I just want it to look more, kind of more space around the rover, so I have to increase this visibility range. I might not even need both layers if I have the static animation, but I do want a dark overlay like that just to have darkness as well. So that would make it a little bit trickier to see where you're going and where you can go. But I do want the range to just be a little bit bigger than it is. Alright. That is about the effect I was hoping for. And let me see, if I go into my interface here, I can actually turn these layers on and off just to see what they're doing. So turn off this extra static layer. You can see that the dark layer is wider than the sphere that I get in the static layer. And if I just have the static on, it makes everything crazy bright unless you have that dark layer. So that's also, I think, an important reason to have that. So I actually have to go back in here, and I want to increase the size of this sphere just a little bit. So I've got these at 700 and 950. I do want to make a note of that. Static overlay. Darkness overlay. Now, I just want to increase this a little bit. Put this maybe at 6. Gives me a little bit more. I can scoot this down. Actually, I think I just want to scoot my transparency layer, so put it 5.5. That might be a bit too big. But we'll try it, because we are adventurous. Go in here. I'm actually going to get rid of the old one. Because it doesn't matter. I can always make it again. Static overlay. Come back in here. Get out of the game. We can just delete this and remake it. Control A to open all of them. Rename it to static. Cut the whole pose and put it in the idle pose. The reason being is walking pose does not work for animated fields. It has to be in the idle pose. And we'll center it. Make sure that it's facing the camera, set to additive, and has no lighting. Ta-da! That should give me a slightly larger radius that I can see the rover in. I can already see that it's a bigger circle, but there's 2 layers of static in here right now, so it's a bit ridiculous. And let's see what that looks like.
Scanning. Entering planetary orbit.
Could be just a little bit bigger on the inner sphere, a little smaller on the outer sphere. Oh. Still, I do like that effect. It's good for the radiation. I haven't actually set it up so I can go to my radiation map yet. Let me add that. Just got this weird little forking branch in here. It'll check the map that you're on and move you to another one based on whichever map you're currently on. So I want this one to take me to the radiated map just to take a peek at it. Looks exactly like the lava map, only it's got radiation. And I do want it so radiation has an effect on navigation at a certain point, so you won't be able to see your mini-map and you won't be able to see much if the radiation levels are high enough. There's going to be high radiation that'll hurt the rover, and then radiation that'll block your view like this. So now it lets me switch through the different planets. It's actually hard to... It's actually going to have a greenish or a yellowish lighting on radiated planets. I haven't tried messing with the lighting yet. You can change the whole map's color with this sun setting. If you've never tried messing with that. That is a bit dark. I want it to be slightly lighter green. So everything is greenish. Slightly darker green. More greenish. There we go. This has its color unaffected because it's glowing lava, which kind of looks weird when you have lighting changes, but I can add lights wherever there's lava to fix that. First I'll just try to see how this looks.
Entering planetary orbit.
Yeah, nice and green and horrible. And your screen will have radiation disturbances. Won't do this on terrestrial planets or during normal storms. I do kind of need to fix the rings. The size of these circles are a bit too big. I'll put this at 56.5. Actually, I want to put it closer to 58. Shrink that ring just a little bit. That's a bit better. problem is it's a bit too round in the center, so I want to bring that down to 8, I think. So that there is more center. That's also going to get cut off. So let's put this at 8, 5. And this at 6. Excuse me. More hollowed out center. I'll do that same dumb pile of steps where I render my animation, save my animation, and I can also click and drag to select all these and right click to clear them. It'll keep all of my layer settings. And I just Control A, open those. Sometimes it does a duplicate whenever you import another set, so always check. It doesn't always, but then you want to recenter everything and reset your orientation. So it should all be in place. Slightly smaller ring. Scanning.
Entering planetary orbit.
Now it does kind of look like a little light. What I want to do is shrink that. I gotta mess with the inner glow, or the darker layer just a bit. I might save that for another time, but I do like that effect. It's going to take a little bit of work to get the sizes with my gradients right, so I don't really want to torture you guys by going through all of that. But I just wanted to show off a few more of the weather and lighting and overlays and hazards and such. I haven't done a whole lot of other additional changes yet, but I'm still also piecing together each of the different types of weather. So I've got my whole list of settings so I can create individual types by changing all the settings as you enter a map. So it's going to read the climate ratings and levels of each planet and determine what kind of planet it is and whether it gets certain types of weather or not based on temperature and climate ratings. So that I'll get into in another video. I think I'm going to take a break for now, come back and work on some more of this terrain stuff, because I would like to make the rover gameplay fun. So you actually have to work your way through these little mazes and gather resources while dodging different terrain types and hazards and weather. And there's going to be, I believe I'm going to include fuel usage of some kind, so you can only go so far in the rover before you have to try and get back to your ship. But I haven't figured out if that's what I want to do just yet. Hopefully I can get some more work done on these different types of weather so they actually affect the rover. Not actually sure what would be reasonable to work on next time. Probably my spawnable damages. There's going to be thunderstorms that they're just normal thunderstorms, and then there's going to be a weather level that has lightning strikes, and the lightning strikes can hit the rover with pretty frequent regularity is what I'm hoping. But we'll see. There's a 50, I think it's going to be like a 60-70% chance to miss the rover and a small chance to actually nail the rover as it's moving around. And then earthquakes, I'm hoping to do something similar to the Star Control style earthquake with these little tectonic bursts that hit the ground, causing area of effect damage. But eventually I'll get to critters and creatures and more structures, turrets and stuff once I finish working on weather. So hopefully I covered a few things that you didn't know about, or some interesting stuff. If there's anything you guys want to see, just let me know. Sometimes I struggle to come up with a topic to specifically cover in these videos, so I just kind of wing it as I go. But hopefully it's interesting and informative and you guys are enjoying what you see. Also, go to screamingbrainstudios.com to get all kinds of free stuff. There's a ton of free textures and game assets and stuff. You can use them however you want. You can edit them, you can redistribute them, you can sell them, you can do whatever you want. They are public domain, 100% Creative Commons 0. There's also tutorials, some of them related to making planet textures and doing procedural stuff. A lot of what I'm doing in this game comes from working on the Screaming Brain Studios assets, or what I've learned along the way. So you can learn some of the stuff that I do with these tutorials, and you can download a lot of the tools that I use from this tools page. Most of them are free. There's a couple paid ones like Photoshop and Sprite, but most of the programs are maybe $10, $20 at max. Everything else is totally free. So definitely check that out. Hopefully you tune in next time. I'll have some more stuff to cover. It's been about an hour since I started, so I'm hoping I covered enough stuff for you guys. Until next time.